If you are going to learn Russian, you should know about some very important differences between the two languages, Russian and English. Well, of course, there are many differences between them, but there are some things that we should point out first of all. Number one, the alphabet. Well, the alphabet is of course the most obvious difference. Russian has 33 letters, which is 7 letters more than English. Some of those letters look familiar to you, and some of them don't. But you should know that even some of those letters that look familiar to you stand for different sounds in the Russian language. For example, this one is not Russian P, this is Russian R. R sound. It sounds R like in Spanish. And this one is not Russian H, this is Russian N sound. And this is not number 3. Well, of course we do have number 3, but in the alphabet this is Z sound. Number 2, phonetics. English has some sounds that Russian doesn't. We don't have the TH sound, as in think, that. That's why you could have heard some Russians saying something like I think instead of I think. We don't have the W sound, as in would. That's why some Russians say something like I would instead of I would. Well, I hope I have pronounced it correctly. But on the other hand, we have some sounds that English doesn't. For example, we have this very interesting vowel sound I. I. It sounds similar to E, but for us, E and I are two different sounds. It's quite common. We have it in such words as ты, which is you, and вы, which is also you. We have two words for you in Russian. Sometimes it doesn't make much difference if you make a mistake with I, but sometimes it does. For example, milo means nice or sweet, and mыло means soap, a piece of soap. Another example is the Russian R sound, which sounds like Spanish R. R. Let me give you some examples. Река, река, it means river. Россия, Россия, it means Russia. Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro. Well, you know what it means. Number 3, cases. One of the scariest things about Russian is that it has 6 cases. Well, what is a case? A case is a special form of a noun, pronoun, adjective or numeral, but usually we speak of noun cases. That has a bit different meaning, it has different ending, and it plays a bit different role in a sentence. Depending on the function of the noun in the sentence, it has different endings. Let's take this sentence for example. This is a cat. Это кот. Well, in this sentence, кот, which is a Russian word for cat, sounds similar, doesn't it? It is used in its normal form. We use this case form when we just name something. But let's look at another sentence. I see the cat. Я вижу кота. Well, in this sentence, we see that кот becomes кота. This is another form, another case, and we use this case when we use a noun as a direct object. Now let's look at this sentence. I gave some food to the cat. Я дал еды коту. Well, in this sentence you see that кот becomes коту, because in this sentence the cat to the cat is an indirect object, and in this case we use another case, which goes with another ending. But a good news about the cases is that if you make some cases mistakes, most likely it wouldn't be a big deal, you would be understood anyway. Number 4, genders. Russian has 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neutral. Well, English has some words that are naturally masculine, the words that we use he with, like father, brother, son, and some words are naturally feminine, we use she with them, mother, sister, daughter. Some words are kind of neutral, the words that we use it with. For example, a chair, table, lamp, light, I don't know, any object. In Russian it's very different. Well, yes, we do have some naturally feminine and naturally masculine words like father, brother, they're masculine, sister, mother, they're feminine, but most of the nouns are just randomly masculine, feminine, or neutral without any logic behind it, especially objects. For example, masculine, TV, wind, sugar, floor; feminine, roof, lamp, wall, idea. So when you learn nouns, you just need to remember which gender they are. By the way, if you learn Spanish or French or any language that has genders, Spanish and French have two genders, you should remember that those genders do not always correspond with the Russian genders. For example, la ville, the city, is feminine in French, but город, the city, is masculine in Russian. Another example, el río, the river, is masculine in Spanish, but река, river, is feminine in Russian. Number 5. Articles. Russian doesn't have articles at all. Well, we do have determiners like some, any, little, much, many, but we don't have the a, an, and the articles, and honestly, we don't understand why would some language even need them. This is why Russian speakers, even those who are fluent in English, mess up with articles a lot. I think you've noticed already that I've made some articles mistake in this video. But anyway, we don't have articles at all, and this makes learning Russian a bit easier. Number 6. To be verb. In Russian, we don't use to be verb in the present tense. Well, in English you have to say something like I am your friend, you are my sister, they are doctors, and so on. In French you have the same to be verb in the present tense. Well, in Spanish you even have two to be verbs, but in Russian you don't use it in the present tense at all. Well, we do have to be verbs in the past tense and in the future tense, but not in the present tense. So in the present tense we say something like I, your friend, you, my sister, they, students. Easy, isn't it? Number 7. Word order. In English you have quite a strict word order, SVO. Subject, verb, object. For example, I love you. I, subject, love, verb, and you, object. Well, in Russian we basically have the same word order, subject, verb, object, but we can change the word positions quite freely, sometimes without any difference, sometimes there is some difference. For example, let's take this sentence. I love you. Я люблю тебя. Let's change the position of the words slightly. Я тебя люблю. I, you, love. Literally. Well, in this case, the position of the words has changed, but the meaning is still the same. There is no difference. But let's take this sentence. Тебя я люблю. You I love. Well, in this case, there is some difference. It's like, I love you, but not someone else. And let's take another sentence. Люблю я тебя. Love I you. Well, there is some difference again. It means something like, I do love you, I really love you. Number 8. Verb tenses. Well, the English tenses are so challenging for us Russian speakers because you guys have so many tenses. It's like about 20. By the way, do you even realize that you have that many tenses? Because if you ask any Russian-speaking person how many tenses we have in our language, I'm quite sure that 99% of the people would say something like, we have only 3 tenses, which is not correct. Because, well, most people don't realize it, but we have more than 3 tenses. We have 2 forms of the past tense, 2 forms of the future tense, and 1 form for the present tense. It depends on how you count them, but anyway we have more than 3 tenses, but not even close to the number of the English tenses, which is about 20 or 24, depending on how you count them again. Of course, the tenses system are very different. For example, we don't have the indefinite tenses and continuous tenses. In English you can say, I go to school. It means that I go to school regularly, every day. I am a school student. It doesn't mean that I'm walking to the school physically right now. And you can say, I am going to school, which means that I'm walking to school or driving to school, that I'm moving to school right now. Well, in Russian it would be 2 exactly the same sentences without any difference between them. If there is some difference in the meaning, like in English, you can understand it only from the context. But on the other hand, Russian verbs are quite flexible about the endings, and what makes Russian tenses hard is that you need to memorize lots of endings. Number 9. Accents. Finally, a great thing about learning Russian is that you don't have to choose what version of the language to learn. Well, English has different accents, dialects. You have British English, which is different from American English. You have different accents of British English, and people in New Orleans speak very differently from how people speak in Minnesota. We don't have this kind of difference in Russian. Well, yes, of course, we do have dialects and we do have accents, but in the major cities, most people speak exactly the same way. There might be some very slight difference, but it's really slight, and even some native speakers don't notice it. It's not even close to the difference between the British English and the American English, between how people speak in New Orleans and in California. Well, basically that's it. Of course, there are many differences between the two languages, but once you start learning Russian, you will notice that although the languages are different, in some ways they are surprisingly similar. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you next time.